Every n8n workflow starts with a trigger. The trigger decides when the workflow runs, what data it receives, and what system started it. Pick the wrong one, and the workflow never fires when it should. This video walks through all 8 trigger types one by one, what each one does, how to set it up, and which ones matter most if you are running a manufacturing or distribution operation. The first trigger is trigger manually. This runs the workflow when you click a button inside n8n. It is for building and testing. It lets you run the workflow on demand, inspect the output of each node, and confirm the logic works before you connect a real trigger. Do not use this in production. The moment the workflow is ready, swap it out for the trigger that matches how the process actually starts. On a schedule, runs at a time you set. Every hour, every day, every Monday at 8 a.m. You configure the interval here and n8n handles the rest. This is useful for any recurring operation that does not depend on something else happening first. A daily inventory report pulled from your ERP and posted to a Google Sheet every morning. A weekly purchase order summary emailed to the ops team every Monday. An end-of-day reconciliation that runs every night at 11 p.m. and flags any orders that did not process correctly. Anything your team currently does manually on a regular schedule is a candidate for this trigger. On webhook call runs when an external system sends an HTTP request to n8n. When you add this trigger, n8n generates a URL. You give that URL to the external system. Whenever that system sends data to the URL, the workflow fires. n8n receives it and the workflow runs. The same pattern works for your ERP. When a purchase order is approved, the ERP sends a webhook to n8n. n8n picks it up and routes it, notifies the relevant team in Slack, updates a tracking sheet, creates a record somewhere else. Any external system that can send an HTTP request can trigger an n8n workflow this way. On app event, runs when something happens inside a connected app. This is different from a webhook. Instead of the external system calling n8n, n8n connects to the app and listens for event through that app's own API. Shopify, the most useful triggers for manufacturers are on order created, on order updated, and on customer created. When a new order comes in, n8n fires and routes it based on order type, value, or customer tag. As for Slack, triggers are commonly used for approval workflows. An approval request lands in Slack, the manager clicks approve or reject, that button click fires an n8n workflow that updates the ERP and notifies the requester. One click resolves the case. For Google Sheets, on row created fires when a new row is added to the sheet. If your team logs quality inspection results in a Google Sheet, this trigger fires the moment when a new result comes in. n8n checks the result, flags failures, logs to the ERP, and notifies QA automatically. On form submission, generates a form directly inside n8n. No external form tool needed. You build the form fields here, n8n hosts it, and the workflow fires when someone submits it. Free forms are common in manufacturing distribution. An RFQ form, or request for quote form, a wholesale application form, and a supplier intake form. When executed by another workflow, turns this workflow into a sub-workflow. It only runs when another workflow calls it. This is useful when your main workflow handles intake and routing, but certain paths need specialized logic. Your main order processing workflow receives every new order. For high-value orders, it calls a separate sub-workflow that runs a credit check and notifies finance. On chat, message fires when a user sends a message through an n8n chat interface. This is for AI-powered workflows. A manager types a question into the chat, the workflow fires, queries the relevant system, and returns an answer. For manufacturers, an internal ops assistant. Someone asks for the current stock level on a SKU, n8n pulls it from the ERP and replies. This gets into AI node territory, which is covered separately, but the trigger is this one. Under other ways, the two triggers most relevant for manufacturing are the email trigger and the error trigger. Email trigger monitors an inbox using IMAP. When a new email arrives, the workflow fires. If your supplier sends a purchase order confirmation by email, n8n monitors that inbox. The moment a confirmation comes in, the workflow parses it and updates the ERP automatically. No one has to manually check and process it. While the error trigger fires when any other workflow in your n8n instance fails. Use this to build a monitoring layer. If a workflow breaks, the error trigger fires a separate workflow that sends a Slack alert to whoever owns that automation. Silent failures are the most expensive kind. This prevents them. One question: how does this process actually start in your business? If something happens in an external app, use on-app event. If another system needs to call n8n, use on-webhook call. If it should run on a time schedule, use on a schedule. If someone fills out a form, use on form submission. If you are building or testing, use trigger manually. If this workflow is called by another workflow, use when executed by another workflow. If you need to react to emails or workflow errors, use other ways. The trigger is the first node. Everything downstream depends on it. Get this right before you build anything else. If this was helpful, comment and subscribe to learn more about n8n automations.